Well, howdy, y'all. Hey, I'm going to be trying out a new technique using some new software, and so I hope y'all enjoy it. It's going to be sort of similar to what other YouTubers have done on a regular basis, but this one has been a collaboration with the man known as Magnus Deacon. Now, this will be on Jessica Valente's wall. Now, a few weeks ago, or maybe a month or so ago, Jessica Valenti wrote an interesting article titled One Perk of Older Age, Fewer Cat Calls by Jessica Valenti. Now I'm going to read it and mention some of the things that me and Magnus Deacon noticed about it. He brought this article to my attention and we sort of co-wrote this freestyle that I'm doing right now. But up on the screen, you should see a screenshot of the article. Quote, "Being on the subways and streets of New York, while female, used to mean walking through a veritable gauntlet of harassment and catcalls. But lately, a curious thing has happened. My world is a much quieter place. The comments and lascivious stares from men had faded away the older I've gotten, leaving an understandable sense of relief. But alongside that is a slightly embarrassing feeling of insecurity that, with every year that goes by, I become more and more invisible to men." So, she hit the wall something but fierce, right? She's got a kid. She's probably got mom butt and mom hips. She's also, obviously a feminist. She was never really that pretty. Yankees, we won't get into that. But I think it's funny that this feminist who spent most of her young life trying to shut that catcalling down is now lamenting that it's gone. It's funny, you don't appreciate something until you've lost it. Right, Ms. Valenti. Continuing, quote, "From the time I was 11 or 12 years old..." Stop, we gotta stop there. 11 or 12 years old, really? I think this was just her head so far up her vagina that this narcissistic female, I have a hard time believing that. But, back to it. Quote, "From the time I was 11 or 12 years old, when I began taking the train to school, I've been on the receiving end of some of the worst things men say to girls and young women. There was the man in a business suit who told me to take care of those titties for me." Stop. That's just one of the best. That's hilarious. All right, back to it. Quote, "The man who, when I was in 7th grade, masturbated in front of me on the subway platform near my home. The man who walked by me in the street, leaned in close, and whispered, 'I want to lick your ear.' So close to my ear that I could feel his hot breath." Stop. Now, see, it's interesting that even after 20 years, more than 20 years, and a child and a husband, and I'll get to her husband in a bit, don't worry about that, guys. Even after all this, she remembers that crap. I can barely remember crap that happened to me 20 years ago. Barely. And me and Miss Valenti are almost the same age. 11, 12 years old. Yeah, hey, some weird shit happened. I vaguely remember it in my head. But yeah, nothing like that. See, the fact that it was so in her brain was the fact that she really appreciated it. That's what me and Magnus Deacon were coming to realize. She really liked it. See, young girls always want to grow up fast. There was that movie about restaurants and crappy restaurant employees, and that one guy who turned into Green Lantern and then later turned into Daredevil, or Deadpool. Not Daredevil. Daredevil turned into Batman. I'm going to get into that. But I forget what that actor's name was, but he played a character and there was kind of like a sleazy waiter douchebag. And he was always complimenting young high school girls who were always smoking, trying to look older. How old do they look? And so, yeah, I mean, that goes into a core part of female psyche, female nature. When they're young, they want to be old so they can be in the game. When they're old, they want to be young so they can be in the game. They just want to be in the game, which is late teens, 20s. Late teens, early 20s. Yeah, no one wants Christmas cake. But okay. Moving on, because I want to make this quick. Quote, "It was miserable But still, as much as I wish it didn't, the thought of not being worth men's notice bothers me. To my great shame, I assume I must look particularly good on the rarer days that I do get catcalled. End quote. Now, this is awesome. So now whenever she does get street harassed, she thinks she looks particularly good. And at the same time, she admits the rarer days. It has nothing to do with the dudes. Now it has nothing to do with the dudes. Whereas in her 20s, she thought it had all to do with the dudes, that they were perverts and they were catcalling her. That had nothing to do with her. It had to do with misogyny and patriarchy in the outside world. Not her. She's a beautiful, flawless female feminist creature. No, it's all those misogyny and patriarchy around her that caused the catcalls. Now, on the rarer days she does get catcalled, she thinks she must look particularly good. Now it has nothing to do with the perverts out there. Catcalling a young woman has to do with normal guys out there catcalling an older woman. No. Like Magnus Deacon pointed out, those guys who are catcalling you now, Miss Valenti, when you're in your mid to late 30s, those guys are the perverts. No. Those guys are the perverts. Oddly, the guys who were doing all that weird crap when you were young, those guys were normal dudes. Biologically and psychologically normal dudes. The dudes who are catcalling you now, guess what? Pervs. Yeah. It's really weird. I forget what it's called. Internal locus of control and external locus of control. Yeah, it's like internal locus of attractiveness and external locus of attractiveness. This woman literally just flipped her mind, flipped her perception, flipped her script to make this seem rational to her. All right, going on. Too long. All right, quote. Sure, there's plenty of reasons besides my age that street harassment has waned over the years. I'm more likely to be walking around with my 4-year-old daughter than not these days, and hopefully even harassers have some sense of propriety. And as women get older, they're less likely to put up with nonsense. I become much more likely to scream at and shame catcallers in recent years. A much different tact than my teen years, when I would just shrink into myself. So she admits to being a crazy middle-aged woman. She admits to being a crazy 30-year-old woman with a kid. She gets catcalled. On the rarer days she gets catcalled, that she feels she looks good because she's getting catcalled, she then turns around and screams, freaking out her daughter, I'm sure. Screams and shames catcallers. She's the crazy woman on the street with the kid. She's the crazy woman on the street with the kid that you don't go anywhere near. You don't go anywhere near this woman. Because the kid's freaking out. She's like, "You pervert! Thank you!" What? "Thank you, pervert, for catcalling me. Now go away, scum. Go away. I have a daughter." I mean, these women are... We've already established that. These women are insane. Now moving on. It's a short article, so I'm trying to keep it short. Quote, "There's a freedom to that. I wouldn't trade my quiet morning walks for the hellishness of my teen years for anything. But when you are brought up to feel that the most important thing you can be is attracted to men, the absence of their attention, even negative attention, can feel distressing. Have I reached my last fuckable day already at 36 years old? I am reminded of a Vanity Fair profile of the gorgeous actress Rose Byrne, where the reporter noted with surprise that Byrne showed no embarrassment at admitting she was, gasp, 35 years old." End quote. Now, unfortunately, Miss Valenti, you might have reached your last fuckable day. I'm sorry. You and the sturdy-looking chick, the comedian that has the politician as a cousin. And, Amy Schumer, she's on the screen. Yeah, you and Amy Schumer. Good news is, or bad news, you ain't got as much to hold on to as Amy does. Or as much money. There. Or as much power and influence and status. So actually, Amy's she's got a little bit more fuckable days left on her than you, dear. I'm sorry. If you want to know if you've reached your last fuckable, ask your husband, who I'll get to in a minute. Back to the article. Quote, "I realize the most properly feminist response to all of this would be to proudly declare that I don't care, that being too old to catcall is glorious freedom, but that would be a lie. I do care, in some way that sits uncomfortably with my politics, enough that it worries me to wonder how I will feel when I'm 45 or 65. End quote. Now, check this out. She is worried about the future. That's something I noticed a lot of women do. They just keep worrying about the future. They keep panicking and making stuff up. What Jessica Valenti is failing to remember is she has a husband. She has a child. She is ironically married. For a feminist, that's ironic. And she has a fairly good job. She has a great education from a private school, I believe. And she lives up north. So, I mean, what are you complaining about, woman? Oh, that's right, because you're no longer young. Oh, you hit the wall. Oh, yeah, that's right, okay. Moving on. Quote, I know that my reaction is normal, considering the culture I've grown up in, as much as I know that my self-worth does not depend on what strangers think. But I do wish there was more nuance in conversations about aging, beauty standards, and feminism. Room enough to admit, without shame, the complicated feelings we can have about it all. End quote. The complicated feelings are you hit the wall, and deep down inside, you're probably not very happy with the man you landed. And I'll get to him, guys, to show us picture, wrap it up. Moving on. Quote, being harassed on the street is not a compliment, and it surely has never felt like one. For most, if not all women, it can be scary and sometimes dangerous to deal with. But I can admit that, even as a seasoned feminist, feminism is a powerful it's a powerful force to still reside in my head. Maybe by acknowledging as much as I can begin to let it go. Sick all over the place on that last. She sort of burned out there near the end, like all hamsters. Hopefully, long before I turn 45. End quote. Boom, in the article. And I'll try to wrap this up real quick. Now, it's hilarious that she's seasoned feminist. Yeah. You've been through more than maybe a dozen, maybe 2 decades of seasons. You honestly have to ask yourself, how many dicks have you had in you? How many dicks have you had in your vagina? How many dicks have you had in your anus? And how many dicks have you had in your mouth? Ms. Valenti, ask yourself that question. And then ask yourself how seasoned you are. Zing! All right. And the idea that sexism is still a powerful force. It's like, it's not Star Wars. It's not Sex Wars. It's not a force. You're not a Jedi. You're not a Sith Lord. Right? But there is something residing in your head. Now, guys, let's take a quick look at her husband, because I only got a minute left on this. All right, take a look at this guy. She married this guy, obviously, because she wanted her kids to have blonde hair and blue eyes, because she was going for the sexy sons hypothesis, but not really, because she wound up with a daughter. But she went for the nearest mangina with the prettiest female traits. Fortunately for her, with a daughter, because he's bald, baldness indicates high testosterone, so her daughter's going to be slutty. But, hey, maybe she's going to be good looking. Maybe she's going to be catcalled and harassed on the street, and maybe attract some attention to you, Miss Valenti. Hey, you never know. Once you divorce your husband, you might be banging your daughter's boyfriends. Who knows? There's always hope, right, Miss Valenti? Well, peace and long life. Yours truly, M.